The social worker's car climbed the narrow mountain road, engine struggling against the steep slope. Behind the wheel, Lisa checked her GPS for the third time. She had been doing this job for 12 years, but this placement felt different, more desperate. In the back seat sat 8-year-old Danny, staring out the window at the tall pine trees. His brown hair needed a cut, and his clothes were clean but didn't fit quite right. Everything he owned was stuffed into an old sports bag beside him. He hadn't said a word for the past hour. Lisa glanced at him in the rearview mirror. This was Danny's 4th placement in 18 months. The first family returned him after 2 weeks, saying he was too quiet and gave them the creeps. The second family lasted a month before complaining that he wouldn't bond with their other children. The third placement ended when Danny was found hiding in a closet during a thunderstorm, refusing to come out for hours. The boy's file made for difficult reading. Born to a teenage mother who disappeared when he was 3. Bounced between relatives who didn't want him. Found living alone in a condemned apartment when he was 7. Surviving on cereal and whatever food the neighbors left outside his door. The trauma had left him unable to trust adults, and he rarely spoke unless directly asked a question. Most foster families wanted younger children or kids who would integrate easily into their homes. Danny was labeled as challenging, which in the system usually meant no one wanted him. That's how Lisa found herself driving up this mountain road to meet a man she'd only spoken to on the phone. Robert Chen lived alone in a cabin he'd built himself, 30 miles from the nearest town. He was a former forest ranger who had retired, early after a back injury. At 47, he had never married and had no children of his own. When he called the county office asking about becoming an emergency foster parent, Lisa's supervisor was skeptical. "We need families who can provide stability and social connections," her supervisor had said. Not hermits living in the woods, but they were running out of options for Danny. The boy was scheduled to be moved to a group home 3 hours away, which would mean changing schools again and losing any chance of forming stable relationships. When Lisa interviewed Robert over the phone, something in his voice made her think this might work. "I know what it's like to feel unwanted," Robert had told her quietly. "I grew up in foster care myself. Spent most of my childhood being shuffled around. Maybe that's why I ended up living alone in the mountains. I understand what it means to need space and time to heal." His background check came back clean. His references from the Forestry Service described him as patient, reliable, and surprisingly good with the troubled teenagers who sometimes got lost on hiking trips. Several mentioned how he could calm down even the most panicked or angry kids. The road finally leveled out, and Lisa saw the cabin ahead. It was bigger than she'd expected, made of logs with a green metal roof. Solar panels caught the afternoon sun, and she could see a vegetable garden off to one side. Chickens wandered around a fenced yard, and smoke rose from the chimney. Before she could turn off the engine, a man emerged from the cabin. He was tall and lean with graying brown hair and a beard. He wore work boots, jeans, and a flannel shirt. His hands looked strong from years of outdoor work, but he moved slowly and calmly like someone who had learned not to startle easily frightened animals. Lisa got out of the car and shook his hand. "You must be Robert." "Call me Rob," he said, with a slight smile. His voice was the same gentle tone she remembered from their phone calls. "And this must be Danny." He walked to the passenger side and knelt down next to the open door, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. He didn't reach for Danny or try to hurry him out of the car. "Hey there," Rob said quietly. "I'm really glad you're here. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Danny looked at him with suspicious dark eyes but didn't say anything. Lisa had warned Rob that the boy might not speak much at first. "Are you hungry?" Rob asked. "I made some sandwiches and I've got fresh milk from the neighbor's cow. But first, would you like to see where you'll be staying?" Danny slowly climbed out of the car, clutching his bag. He stood close to the car door, ready to jump back in if needed. Rob didn't try to take his bag or touch him. Instead, he started walking slowly toward the cabin, talking in the same calm voice. "I built this place myself about 10 years ago," he said. "Took me 2 summers to get it right. The logs came from trees that fell in a storm, so I had to haul them up here one by one. Probably not the smartest way to do it, but I'm pretty stubborn. Lisa noticed that Danny was listening, even though he stayed several steps behind. Rob led them onto the front porch, which had 2 rocking chairs and several potted plants. "This is my favorite spot in the evening," Rob said. "You can see deer come out of the forest to drink from the stream down there. Sometimes there are elk too, but they're more careful about showing themselves." Inside, the cabin felt warm and lived in. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was clean and organized. Books filled shelves along one wall, and Lisa could see titles about nature, survival skills, and what looked like children's adventure stories. A stone fireplace dominated one end of the room, with a comfortable couch and chairs arranged around it. "Let me show you your room," Rob said to Danny. He led them down a short hallway to a small bedroom with a window that looked out into the forest. The room had been carefully prepared. A twin bed was covered with a thick quilt, and there was a small desk and chair by the window. On the desk were some books about wildlife and a small wooden carving of a bear. "I made that bear myself," Rob said. "Used to do a lot of wood carving in the evenings. If you're interested, I could teach you how." Danny set his bag on the bed and walked to the window. For the first time since getting out of the car, he seemed to relax slightly. Lisa watched as he looked out at the tall trees and the stream running behind the cabin. "There's a family of raccoons that lives in that big oak tree," Rob said, joining him at the window but keeping some distance. "The mother has 3 babies this year. They come out around sunset to look for food, and there's a red-tailed hawk that nests somewhere up on the ridge. I see him hunting almost every day." Danny nodded slightly but still didn't speak. Rob showed them the rest of the cabin, a small kitchen with a wood-burning stove, a bathroom with hot water heated by solar panels, and his own bedroom. Everything was simple but comfortable. Outside, he pointed out the chicken coop, the garden, and a workshop where he built furniture and did repairs. "I know this is different from living in town," Rob said to Danny. "It's quiet up here, and we're pretty far from other people. But there's a lot to see and do if you're interested in learning about the outdoors. And if you decide you don't like it, that's okay too. We'll figure something else out." Lisa was impressed by how Rob talked to Danny, not like he was talking down to a child, but like he was speaking to another person who deserved respect and honesty. He didn't make promises he might not be able to keep, and he didn't try to force cheerfulness. They sat on the porch for a while, eating the sandwiches Rob had made. Danny ate slowly but finished everything on his plate. When a chipmunk ran across the yard, Lisa saw him watch it with real interest for the first time that day. "The school bus comes up here twice a week to pick up the Henderson kids from the next property over," Rob explained to Lisa. "It's about a mile walk through the woods to their place, but there's a good trail. Danny could ride with them when school starts again in a few weeks." As the afternoon wore on, Lisa found herself feeling more confident about this placement. Rob seemed genuinely interested in having Danny there, not like he was doing anyone a favor. He had thought through the practical details, from schooling to medical care to emergency contacts. When it was time for her to leave, Danny looked worried for the first time. Lisa knelt down beside him. "I'll come check on you next week," she promised. "And if you need anything before then, Rob has my phone number. You can call me anytime, okay?" Danny nodded, but still looked uncertain. "Hey," Rob said quietly, "want to help me feed the chickens before dinner? They get pretty cranky if they have to wait too long." As Lisa drove back down the mountain, she found herself hoping this would work. Danny needed someone patient enough to let him heal at his own pace. And maybe, just maybe, Rob needed someone to share his quiet mountain life with. Sometimes the most unlikely matches turned out to be exactly what both people needed. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky pink and orange. In her rearview mirror, she could see the warm light from Rob's cabin windows. 40. The first time in months she felt hopeful about Danny's future. The first night was the hardest. Danny lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to sounds he'd never heard before. Instead of traffic and sirens, there were owls hooting and the rustling of small animals in the bushes. The darkness was complete in a way that city darkness never was. No streetlights, no neon signs, just black space beyond his window. Around midnight, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Danny tensed, ready to hide or run. But the footsteps stopped outside his door without. Coming in, after a few moments he heard Rob's quiet voice. "I'm just checking to make sure you're okay," Rob said through the door. "If you need anything, I'll be in the living room reading for a while longer. There's water and snacks in the kitchen if you get hungry." The footsteps moved away and Danny heard the soft creak of the rocking chair on the front porch. Through his window he could see a small circle of light from Rob's reading lamp. Knowing the man was nearby but not crowding him, helped Danny finally fall asleep. He woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. In the kitchen, Rob was making breakfast, humming quietly to himself. He looked up when Danny appeared in the doorway, but didn't make a big fuss about it. "Morning," Rob said. "Hope you slept okay. How do you like your eggs?" Danny wasn't used to being asked how he liked things. In most places, you ate whatever was put in front of you and were grateful for it. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Well, let's try scrambled," Rob said. "If you don't like them, we'll try something else tomorrow." After breakfast, Rob didn't announce any big plans or try to entertain Danny. Instead, he simply went about his morning routine. He checked on the chickens, watered the garden, and split some firewood for the evening. Danny followed at a distance, watching everything. Rob worked with his hands in a way Danny had never seen before. Everything he did had a purpose, and he seemed to enjoy even simple tasks like stacking wood or pulling weeds. He talked while he worked, but not directly to Danny. Instead, he seemed to be talking to himself, explaining what he was doing and why. "These tomatoes are getting pretty big," he said, examining the plants in his garden. "Probably have fresh tomatoes in a week or two. Nothing tastes better than a tomato that's been growing in your own dirt." When one of the chickens got out of its pen, Rob patiently guided it back without getting frustrated or making loud noises. Danny watched him repair a loose board in the chicken coop, measuring twice and cutting once, taking time to do the job right. "My grandfather taught me that," Rob said, noticing Danny watching him work with the saw. "He used to say that anything worth doing is worth doing well. Doesn't matter if it's building a house or making a sandwich. Put some care into it." The second day followed a similar pattern. Rob had his routines and he made space for Danny to join in if he wanted to, or watch from a distance if he preferred. When Danny showed interest in the wood carving tools on Rob's workbench, Rob didn't immediately offer to teach him. Instead, he simply left a piece of soft pine and a safe carving knife where Danny could see them. "That's basswood," Rob mentioned casually. "Good wood for beginners. Easy to work with. Doesn't split much." By the third day, Danny was helping with small tasks without being asked. He gathered eggs from the chicken coop and helped carry vegetables in from the garden. Rob always thanked him for the help, but he didn't make it sound like Danny was doing him some huge favor. It felt more like they were working together. The breakthrough came on the fourth evening. Danny had been watching Rob whittle a piece of wood on the front porch, fascinated by how a simple block could become something recognizable. Rob was carving what looked like a small owl, and Danny could see the bird's features emerging from the wood. "What are you making?" Danny asked. It was the first question he'd asked since arriving. Rob looked up and Danny saw a small smile cross his face. "An owl," he said, continuing to work. "Saw a screech owl in that tree yesterday morning, and I thought I'd try to capture what it looked like." Danny moved closer, sitting on the porch steps where he could see better. Rob continued carving, explaining what he was doing without making it feel like a lesson. "The trick is to remove just a little bit at a time," Rob said. "You can always take more wood off, but you can't put it back on. So you go slow and think about each cut." "Is it hard?" Danny asked. "Like most things, it's hard until you learn how to do it," Rob said. "Then it gets easier. But even when you know what you're doing, you still have to pay attention. The wood will tell you which way it wants to be cut if you listen to it." That night, Rob left a small piece of basswood and a beginner's carving knife on Danny's desk. He didn't say anything about it, just left them there like they'd always belonged to Danny. The next morning, Danny brought the wood and knife to the breakfast table. "Could you show me how to start?" he asked quietly. Rob's face lit up, but he kept his voice calm. I'd love to, he said. Let's start with something simple. How about a small fish? They spent the morning on the front porch, with Rob guiding Danny's hands and showing him how to hold the knife safely. Danny was naturally careful and patient, which Rob said were the most important qualities for wood carving. You've got good hands for this, Rob told him. Steady and careful. That's more important than being fast. As the days passed, Danny began to relax in ways he hadn't in years. He still didn't talk much, but he asked questions about the things that interested him. How did Rob know which plants were safe to eat? Why did some birds migrate while others stayed all winter? How did he build the cabin without power tools? Rob answered every question thoughtfully, never making Danny feel stupid for not knowing something. Often his answers led to hands-on demonstrations. They identified edible plants during walks in the forest. Rob showed him how different birds built different kinds of nests. They visited the workshop, where Rob kept his hand tools, and learned about measuring and joining wood. I like that you ask questions, Rob told Danny one evening as they watched the sun set from the porch. Means you're curious about the world. That's a good thing to be. Danny was getting used to the rhythms of mountain life. Early mornings when the air was cool and the light was soft. Long afternoons working in the garden or workshop. Evenings on the porch, listening to the sounds of the forest settling down for the night. He was also getting used to Rob's way of being around people. The man never crowded him or demanded attention. He was simply present and available when Danny needed him. If Danny wanted to help with something, Rob welcomed the company. If Danny needed to be alone, Rob gave him space without taking it personally. You know, Rob said one evening as they worked on their carving projects. I spent a lot of years living up here by myself. I thought I liked the quiet. But having you here has reminded me how nice it is to share things with someone else. Like seeing that hawk catch a fish yesterday. It's more fun when there's someone there to see it with you. Danny nodded, understanding exactly what Rob meant. For the first time in his life, he was beginning to feel like he belonged somewhere. Not because someone felt sorry for him or because it was their job to take care of him, but because someone actually wanted him there. That night, when the usual sounds of the forest filled the darkness outside his window, Danny didn't feel scared or alone. Instead, he felt safe. Down the hall, Rob was reading in his room, and the knowledge that the Yao man was there if needed was enough. For the first time in months, Danny fell asleep without worrying about where he'd be tomorrow. 3 weeks had passed since Danny arrived at the mountain cabin, and a comfortable routine had developed between him and Rob. They worked together in the mornings, spent quiet afternoons on separate projects, and shared simple meals without much conversation. Danny was eating better and sleeping through the night, but he still kept his thoughts mostly to himself. The evening that changed everything started like any other. Rob was sitting on the front porch after dinner working on a new carving project. The piece of wood in his hands was larger than usual, and Danny could see it was going to be something more complex than the simple animals Rob usually made. Danny had finished his own carving, a small fish that actually looked like a fish, and was feeling proud of his progress. He wandered out to the porch and sat on the steps watching Rob work. The man's hands moved with practiced skill, each cut deliberate and confident. "What are you making?" Danny asked, the question coming easier now than it had weeks ago. Rob looked up and smiled. "A bird," he said, holding up the wood so Danny could see the rough shape emerging. "A red-tailed hawk, actually, like the one that hunts over the ridge every morning." Danny moved closer, studying the emerging figure. He could already see the proud curve of the bird's head and the suggestion of powerful wings. "It looks real," he said with genuine admiration. "Want to learn how to do something like this?" Rob asked casually, as if he were offering to teach Danny how to tie his shoes rather than share a skill that took years to master. Danny's eyes widened. "You'd teach me something that hard?" Rob set down his carving and looked at Danny seriously. "I'd teach you anything you wanted to learn," he said. That's what people do for each other when they care about someone." The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time Rob had directly acknowledged that their relationship was becoming something more than a temporary arrangement. Danny felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. I never had anyone teach me things before, Danny said quietly. Not real things anyway. What do you mean? Rob asked gently. Danny was quiet for a long moment, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. In most places, they just wanted me to stay out of the way and not cause problems. Nobody ever wanted to spend time with me just because. Rob felt his heart clench at the boy's words. He set down his carving tools and turned to face Danny fully. Well, I do, he said simply. Want to spend time with you, I mean. You're good company, Danny. You pay attention to things and you think before you speak. Those are rare qualities. Danny looked up at Rob with surprise. Really? Really, Rob confirmed. I've been living alone up here for 10 years, and I thought I was happy. But having you here has shown me the difference between being content and actually enjoying life. You make everything more interesting. That night, as they sat together carving by lamplight, Danny began to open up in ways he never had before. He told Rob about the nightmares that sometimes woke him up. Dreams about being abandoned or forgotten. He talked about how hard it was to trust adults when so many had let him down before. Rob listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making a soft sound of understanding. When Danny finished talking, Rob was quiet for a moment before responding. I grew up in foster care too, Rob said finally. From the time I was 5 until I aged out at 18, I know what it's like to always wonder when the next move is coming, always waiting for people to decide they don't want you anymore. Danny looked at him with surprise. You did? Rob nodded. 7 different homes, he said. Some were okay. Some weren't so great. None of them felt permanent. That's probably why I ended up living alone in the mountains. Seemed safer than trying to trust people again. What changed? Danny asked. Rob smiled slightly. You did, he said. Having you here has reminded me that not all relationships have to end badly. Sometimes people can choose to stick with each other, even when things get difficult. Over the following days, their conversations deepened. Rob shared stories from his years as a forest ranger, tales of rescuing lost hikers and dealing with dangerous wildlife. He talked about his early attempts at building the cabin, including some spectacular failures that made Danny laugh out loud. The first winter I was here, the roof leaked so badly I had to sleep with 3 buckets around my bed, Rob confessed. Took me 4 tries to figure out how to properly seal the seams. Danny found himself sharing memories too. Good ones from before his life fell apart, like fishing with his grandfather and building snow forts with neighborhood kids. Rob listened to these stories with the same attention he gave to everything else, asking questions that showed he was really hearing what Danny said. The breakthrough came during a thunderstorm that rolled through the mountains without warning. Danny had been outside helping Rob repair a fence when the sky suddenly darkened and rain began falling in heavy sheets. They ran for the cabin, laughing as they got soaked. But once inside, the sound of thunder rolling across the peaks triggered something in Danny. He went very still, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Rob recognized the signs of panic and immediately knelt down beside the boy. Hey, you're okay, Rob said quietly. We're safe inside. It's just noise. It can't hurt us. But Danny was somewhere else, lost in a memory of a terrible storm when he was younger, alone and scared in that abandoned apartment. Rob stayed close but didn't try to grab him or force him to respond. Instead, he began talking in a calm, steady voice about practical things. The roof here is solid, Rob said. I built it to handle storms much worse than this one. The walls are thick logs that have been standing for over 100 years before I ever cut them down. This cabin has weathered plenty of storms and it'll weather plenty more. Gradually, Danny's breathing slowed and his focus returned to the present. When he looked at Rob, there were tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Danny whispered. For what? Rob asked gently. For being scared of stupid things. Rob sat down beside him on the couch. Thunder isn't stupid to be scared of, he said, especially if something bad happened to you during a storm before. Fear makes sense when you've been hurt. Danny leaned, against Rob's side, something he'd never done before. Rob wrapped an arm around him carefully, ready to let go if the boy pulled away. Instead, Danny relaxed into the comfort. "I was alone during a really bad storm once," Danny said quietly. "The power went out and I didn't have any food or candles. I was so scared the roof was going to cave in." "How old were you?" Rob asked. 6, I think, maybe 7. Rob tightened his arm around Danny slightly. "That sounds terrifying," he said. "No wonder storms make you nervous. But you're not alone anymore, and you're not in that place anymore. You're here with me, and I'm not going anywhere." They sat together until the storm passed, Rob talking quietly about safe things, the birds that would come out after the rain, the way the forest smelled clean and fresh after a good thunderstorm, the vegetables in the garden that would appreciate the water. When the sun came out and steam began rising from the wet earth, Danny pulled back and looked at Rob seriously. "Do you really mean it?" Danny asked. "About not going anywhere?" Rob met his eyes steadily. "I mean it," he said. "I want you to stay here, Danny. Not because it's my job or because someone is paying me to take care of you. Because you belong. Here. Because this feels like home when you're here." Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly Rob almost missed it, he said, "It feels like home to me too." That evening, as they prepared dinner together, something had shifted between them. The careful politeness was gone, replaced by something warmer and more real. When Danny accidentally dropped a plate and it shattered on the kitchen floor, he flinched, expecting anger or frustration. Instead, Rob just handed him the broom. "Happens to everyone," he said matter-of-factly. "I broke 3 plates my first week here. Good thing I ordered extras." As Danny swept up the pieces, he realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't walking on eggshells around an adult. Rob wasn't going to send him away for making mistakes or being imperfect. The man genuinely seemed to want him there, problems and all. That night, Danny knocked on Rob's bedroom door before going to sleep. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Rob asked. Danny thought for a moment. "For staying," he said finally. "Even when I got scared?" Rob smiled. "Thank you for letting me," he replied. As Danny headed to his own room, he felt something he'd never experienced before. The security of knowing that tomorrow and the day after that, he'd wake up in the same place with the same person who cared about him. For the first time in his 8 years of life, he was truly home. When autumn arrived in the mountains, it brought with it a challenge that both Rob and Danny had been quietly dreading. School. The local elementary school was small, with only 200 students from kindergarten through 8th grade, but it still represented Danny's first real test in the outside world since coming to live with Rob. Danny's academic skills were behind where they should have been for a 3rd grader. Years of instability had left gaps in his education that Rob had been working to fill during their quiet summer together. Every evening after dinner, they sat at the kitchen table working through basic math and reading skills. Rob was patient and encouraging, never making Danny feel stupid for not knowing things other kids his age took for granted. "Learning happens at different speeds for different people," Rob told him one evening when Danny grew frustrated with a math problem. "Some kids learn to ride a bike when they're 4, others when they're 7. Doesn't make either group better or worse, just different timing." The first day of school was harder than either of them had expected. Danny stood at the edge of the playground, wearing new clothes that Rob had carefully picked out to help him fit in, but still looking uncertain and out of place. The other children seemed to know each other well, running around in established groups that had no obvious opening for a quiet boy from the mountains. Rob had offered to walk Danny to his classroom, but Danny had insisted he could manage on his own. Now watching his son, and Rob had begun thinking of Danny that way, though neither of them had spoken the word aloud yet, struggled to find his place among the other children, Rob wondered if he should have insisted on staying. The teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was kind and experienced with children who needed extra support. She'd taught in the mountain community for 15 years and understood that kids came from all kinds of backgrounds. She made sure Danny had a seat near the front where she could keep an eye on him, and paired him with Tommy Henderson, a friendly boy whose family lived on the neighboring property. But even with Mrs. Patterson's help, the transition was difficult. Danny's reading level was significantly behind his classmates, and he struggled to keep up with assignments that the other children found easy. Math was better. Rob's evening lessons had helped there. But Danny still felt lost and different. Most of the time, the social aspects were even harder. The other children had grown up together, sharing inside jokes and common experiences that Danny couldn't relate to. When they talked about video games, Danny had nothing to contribute. There was no television or gaming system at the cabin. When they discussed movies or popular TV shows, Danny felt like they were speaking a foreign language. Some of the children were curious about Danny's living situation and asked innocent questions that still stung. "Why don't you have a real mom and dad?" one girl asked during lunch. "Why do you live so far away from everyone else?" Danny didn't know how to explain his complicated history or defend Rob against the implied criticism that a single man living alone in the mountains wasn't a real parent. He started eating lunch by himself and spending recess sitting under a tree with a book instead of trying to join the other children's games. Rob noticed the changes immediately. Danny came home each day more withdrawn and discouraged. His appetite decreased, and the nightmares that had mostly disappeared during the summer began returning. One evening, Rob found Danny crying quietly in his room after a particularly difficult day. "Want to talk about it?" Rob asked, sitting on the edge of Danny's bed. "I don't fit in," Danny said, his voice muffled by his pillow. "I'm too different. I don't know the same things they know, and I can't do the same things they can do." Rob felt his heart break a little for this boy who was trying so hard to find his place in the world. "Different isn't always bad," he said gently. "Sometimes it just means you have experiences and knowledge that other people don't have. How many of those kids know how to carve wood or identify animal tracks? How many of them could start a fire without matches or find their way home using just the stars?" "That stuff doesn't matter at school," Danny said. "Maybe not," Rob agreed. "But it matters other places. And the things that matter at school, reading and math and getting along with people, those are things you can learn. You're already getting better at them." They developed strategies together for dealing with school challenges. Rob helped Danny practice reading aloud until his confidence improved. They worked on math problems until the basic concepts became automatic. Most importantly, Rob taught Danny that it was okay to ask for help when he needed it. "Smart people aren't the ones who know everything," Rob explained. "Smart people are the ones who know when to ask questions." The real test came in October, when a bigger boy named Jake started picking on Danny during recess. Jake was a fifth grader who seemed to enjoy finding kids he could intimidate, and Danny's quiet nature made him an easy target. It started with small things, knocking Danny's books out of his hands in the hallway, cutting in front of him in the lunch line, making comments about his clothes or his hair. Danny tried to ignore it, remembering advice about bullies losing interest if you didn't react, but Jake seemed to take his silence as encouragement. The situation escalated when Jake started targeting not just Danny, but a first grader named Amy who was even smaller and more vulnerable. One afternoon, Danny watched Jake corner Amy near the playground equipment, demanding that she give him her snack money. Something inside Danny snapped. All the fear and helplessness he'd felt throughout his childhood crystallized into anger at seeing someone else being hurt the way he had been hurt so many times before. Without thinking about the consequences, Danny stepped between Jake and Amy. "Leave her alone," Danny said, his voice steadier than he felt. Jake laughed. "What are you going to do about it, mountain boy?" "Just leave her alone," Danny repeated. "She didn't do anything to you." Jake pushed Danny hard, sending him stumbling backward. When Danny got back up and stepped forward again, Jake swung at him. Danny managed to duck the first punch, but the second one caught him in the eye. Instead of backing down, Danny fought back. The fight was brief, but intense. Danny was smaller than Jake, but months of physical work at the cabin had made him stronger than he looked. More importantly, he was fighting for something he believed in rather than just defending himself. When the teachers broke up the fight, both boys were bruised, but Jake was the one who looked surprised and shaken. Danny sat in the principal's office with a black eye and skinned knuckles, waiting for Rob to arrive. He expected to be in serious trouble. Most of his previous foster families had strict rules against fighting regardless of the circumstances. He worried that this might be the thing that finally made Rob decide he was too much trouble to keep. When Rob walked into the office and saw Danny's injuries, his first reaction wasn't anger, it was concern. He knelt down beside Danny's chair and gently examined the black eye. "You okay?" Rob asked quietly. Danny nodded, though his eye was throbbing and he felt sick to his stomach from nerves. After hearing the full story from the principal and several witnesses, Rob was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Danny. "Seriously, fighting isn't usually the best way to solve problems," Rob said. "But sometimes when someone smaller than you is being hurt and there's no other help available, it's the right thing to do. I'm proud of you for standing up for Amy." Danny's eyes filled with tears of relief. "You're not mad?" "I'm not mad," Rob confirmed. "I'm proud. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped her, even though it cost you something. That takes courage." That evening, as Rob cleaned Danny's cuts and applied ice to his bruised eye, they talked about better ways to handle bullying and when it was appropriate to fight versus when to get adult help. But the underlying message was clear. Rob supported Danny's decision to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. Word of the fight spread through the small school quickly. Instead of making Danny more of an outcast, it seemed to earn him a kind of respect he hadn't had before. Amy's older brother, a fourth grader named David, started sitting with Danny at lunch. Tommy Henderson, who had been friendly but distant, began inviting Danny to join playground games. Even more surprisingly, Jake left both Danny and Amy alone after that. The bully seemed to understand that Danny wasn't an easy target anymore, and that there were consequences for his actions. As winter approached, Danny's confidence grew both at school and at home. His reading improved dramatically, and his math skills caught up to grade level. He made genuine friends with Tommy and David, and even some of the girls in his class started including him in group projects and conversations. The first real snowfall came in November, transforming the mountain landscape into something magical. Danny had never seen snow like this, not the dirty, slushy snow of city streets, but pristine white drifts that sparkled in the sunlight and crunched satisfyingly under his boots. Rob taught him how to build snow caves and track animals in the fresh powder. They went snowshoeing on weekends, following deer trails and looking for signs of the elusive mountain wildlife that was harder to spot in other seasons. In the evenings, they sat by the fire working on carving projects and reading together. Spring came early to the mountains that year, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed to touch everything around the cabin. Danny had been living with Rob for almost a year now, and the quiet, fearful boy who had arrived the previous summer was hardly recognizable in the confident 9-year-old who bounded down the porch steps each morning to help with chores. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been built slowly, day by day, through small moments of trust and understanding. Danny now helped Rob with complex projects around the property, his small hands proving surprisingly skilled at detailed work. His reading had improved so much that he was ahead of his class in several subjects, and he had developed a reputation at school as someone you could count on to help younger kids who were struggling. But perhaps the most significant change was in how Danny saw himself. The boy who had once believed he was unwanted and difficult to love now understood that he was valued for exactly who he was. Rob had never tried to change Danny into someone else. Instead, he had helped Danny become the best version of himself. The conversation about adoption started in the most natural way possible. They were working together in Rob's workshop on a Saturday morning, building a bookshelf for Danny's growing collection of nature guides and adventure stories. Danny was carefully sanding a piece of wood while Rob measured and marked cuts for the next section. "Rob," Danny said quietly, not looking up from his work, "what happens when I turn 18? Rob paused in his measuring. "What do you mean? Will I have to leave then?" Danny asked. "Like, is there a rule that says I can't live here anymore when I'm grown up?" Rob set down his pencil and turned to face Danny fully. "Is that something you've been worrying about?" Danny nodded, still, focused intently on his sanding. Sometimes I wake up at night and remember that this is supposed to be temporary, that someday someone might decide I have to go somewhere else." Rob felt his heart clench at the fear in Danny's voice. After all, these months of building trust and security, the boy was still afraid of being abandoned. Rob realized that for all their closeness, they had never actually talked about the future in concrete terms. "Danny," Rob said gently, "look at me for a minute." Danny raised his eyes, and Rob could see the anxiety there that he'd tried so hard to hide. "This isn't temporary," Rob said firmly. "You're not going anywhere when you turn 18, or when you turn 28, or when you turn 58. This is your home. I'm your family. That doesn't change just because you get older. But, legally," Danny started. "Legally, I'd like to adopt you," Rob said. "If that's something you'd want. It would mean that you're my son in every way, not just in my heart but on paper too. It would mean no one could ever make you leave, and no one could ever say I don't have the right to make decisions about your care." Danny's eyes widened. "You want to adopt me?" "I've wanted to adopt you since about 3 weeks after you got here," Rob admitted. "But I wanted to make sure you felt safe and settled first. I wanted it to be your choice, not something that was decided for you." Danny set down his sandpaper and walked over to where Rob was standing. Without warning, he wrapped his arms around Rob's waist in a fierce hug. "I want that too," Danny said, his voice muffled against Rob's shirt. "I want to be your real son." "You're already my real son," Rob said, hugging him back. "The paperwork will just make it official." The adoption process took several months, during which time Rob and Danny had to work with lawyers, social workers, and court officials to make everything legal. Danny had to speak with a judge about whether this was truly what he wanted, and Rob had to prove that he could provide a stable, loving home for a child. Lisa, the social worker who had first brought Danny to the mountain, was thrilled with how well the placement had worked out. During her final home visit, she found Danny and Rob working together to expand the chicken coop, laughing as they tried to convince an escaped hen to return to the fenced area. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Lisa told Rob privately. "I've seen a lot of placements, some good and some not so good, but I've rarely seen a child transform the way Danny has. You've given him something I wasn't sure he'd ever find." "What's that?" Rob asked. "The knowledge that he's worthy of being loved," Lisa said simply. "Not because someone feels sorry for him or because it's their job, but because of who he is as a person. That's going to change the entire trajectory of his life." The adoption hearing was scheduled for a warm day in May, exactly 11 months after Danny had first arrived at the cabin. Danny wore his best clothes, a button-down shirt and khakis that Rob had helped him pick out, and he had practiced what he wanted to say to the judge. The courtroom was small and less intimidating than Danny had expected. Besides him and Rob, there were only a few other people present: Lisa, their lawyer, and the judge herself, a kind-looking woman named Judge Williams, who had a reputation for caring deeply about the children who came before her court. Judge Williams asked Danny several questions about his life with Rob, his school performance, and whether he understood what adoption meant. Danny answered each question clearly and thoughtfully, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "Why do you want Rob to adopt you?" Judge Williams asked. Danny had prepared for this question, but when the moment came, his rehearsed answer flew out of his head. Instead, he spoke from his heart. "Because he's already my dad in every way that matters," Danny said. "He teaches me things and takes care of me when I'm sick and helps me with my homework. But mostly because he chose me. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He makes me feel like I'm worth something." Judge Williams smiled. "And Rob, why do you want to adopt Danny?" Rob looked at the boy sitting beside him, this child who had changed his entire world without even trying. "Because he's made my life complete in ways I didn't even know it was incomplete," Rob said. "He's taught me what it means to be a family. I can't imagine my life without him in it." The judge asked a few more procedural questions, reviewed the paperwork one final time, and then smiled at both of them. "Based on everything I've seen and heard today, and based on the glowing reports from Danny's school and social services, I'm happy to grant this adoption," Judge Williams said. "Danny, Rob is now legally your father. and you are legally his son. Congratulations to both of you." The moment the gavel came down, Danny launched himself at Rob in a hug that nearly knocked them both over. There were tears in Rob's eyes as he held his son, and whispered, "Welcome to the family, kiddo." After the hearing, they drove back up the mountain road that had brought them together almost a year earlier. But this time, there was no uncertainty about the future, no worry about temporary placements or conditional arrangements. This time, they were going home as a real family. That evening, they sat on the familiar front porch as the sun set behind the mountains. Danny was working on a new carving project, a detailed replica of their cabin that he planned to give Rob as an adoption gift. Rob was reading a book about advanced woodworking techniques, planning future projects they could tackle together. "Dad," Danny said, testing out the word he was now free to use without reservation. "Yeah?" Rob responded, his heart still skipping a beat at hearing Danny call him that. "Thank you," Danny said simply. "For what?" Danny thought for a moment, looking out at the forest that had become as familiar to him as his own reflection. "For taking a chance on me," he said finally. "For seeing something good in me when nobody else did." Rob set down his book and looked at his son seriously. "Danny, I need you to understand something," he said. "I didn't take a chance on you. I recognized something special that was already there. All I did was give you a safe place to let it grow." As the stars began to appear in the clear mountain sky, father and son sat together in comfortable silence. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of night creatures beginning their routines, and smoke from their chimney rose straight up in the still air. Danny had found more than just a home in these mountains. He had found himself. He had learned that he was capable of love and worthy of being loved. He had discovered talents and interests he never knew he possessed. Most importantly, he had learned what it felt like to belong somewhere completely and unconditionally. Rob had found something unexpected, too. After years of thinking he was content with solitude, he had discovered the joy of sharing his life with someone else. Danny hadn't just filled an empty space in Rob's life. He had shown Rob spaces he didn't even know existed. Their story had started with a desperate social worker looking for any option for a difficult child. It had become something neither of them could have imagined, a perfect match between two people who needed exactly what the other had to offer. In the months and years that followed, their mountain home would see many changes. Danny would grow taller and more confident, excelling in school and making lasting friendships. Rob would learn to navigate the complexities of parenthood, from helping with homework to teaching Danny to drive on the winding mountain roads. There would be challenges ahead. There always are in any family. But they would face those challenges together, with the solid foundation of love and trust they had built during that transformative first year.